Good morning. It's good to be here this morning, all of us, and to be able to come together and worship, sing songs together, study God's Word. And hopefully that's exactly what we're able to do. I'd like to talk about King Saul this morning. And there's some things, obviously, we know about King Saul. He's the first king of Israel, and things started off pretty well. He was chosen by God, which is a plus. He was also, for the most part, favored by the people. He was tall, he was handsome. They wanted him as king for the most part. And what we see is early on, he seems pretty humble, and he has some success. And he's successful in uniting the people. But what I want to do now is I'm going to look at the end of his life. Because at the end of his life, we have a very different picture. At the end of his life, Saul is kneeling on the ground. And he's looking out over a battlefield. A battlefield that's littered with the corpses of Israelite soldiers. His sons are dead, and he's fatally wounded. He sees the Philistines pressing in on him, and he realizes there's no way out. So he decides to take matters into his own hands. He calls his armor bearer over and asks him to strike him down, but his servant refuses. So he sees no other way. He sets up his sword and he falls on it. And his body collapses and lies with the fallen soldiers and his slain sons. This is the end of Saul. This is tragic. This is terrible. Saul not only dies, but he loses everything as well. He loses his nation. He loses his family. How did we get here? How, after such a positive start, how do we end up in this place, on this bloody battlefield? How does that happen? Well, that's what I'd like to think about this morning. And so what I want us to do is I want us to look at a few stories this morning where I think we see what led Saul to this kind of end. And where I'd like you to turn first is to 1 Samuel chapter 13. 1 Samuel chapter 13. Most of our passages will be from 1 Samuel, so it's worth being over there. In 1 Samuel 13, we're going to be toward the beginning of Saul's reign. I think he's in year 3 out of 42. And in this passage, he's at war with the Philistines, which, by the way, is a good thing because that's one of his mandates as king, is to drive out the Philistines, to defeat the Philistines. That's what he's supposed to do. So that's good. He has been told, before the passage that we're going to get to wait on Samuel. Samuel told him to wait 7 days, and that he would come and he'd offer a burnt offering. Well, the battle at first goes very well for Saul. They are defeating the Philistines. Things are going great. They have success. And then the tides turn. The Philistines muster their forces. They have a great army now, and they come back. And the Israelites start to flee. And what Saul decides to do is he decides, Samuel's not here yet. It's been 7 days. I'm going to go ahead and offer the burnt offering. Well, guess who shows up after he does this? Samuel. And that's what we're going to pick up. Look in verse 11. So Samuel's going to question what's going on here, and I want us to focus on Saul's response. Samuel says, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." So we'll stop here. So Samuel says, "What have you done?" And I think, to Saul's credit, I think he's being pretty truthful here. He says, the people were leaving. You weren't here. The Philistines were closing in. So I did something not right. I forced myself to do it, though. But I want you to notice what's the first reason he gives. The people are leaving him. He doesn't want the people to leave him. Because if the people leave him, that probably means that he's going to lose the kingdom. And at this point, it probably also means he's going to lose his life because the Philistines are coming in too. And so I think we look at this and we look at when he makes a statement, "I forced myself to make the burnt offering." We say, I see that. That makes sense to me. Kind of seems excusable, doesn't it? It's like, what other choice did he have? He's got to save himself. But you know what's interesting? Is it, even though you and I might look at this and say, well, it doesn't seem like he wants to disobey God here. It seems like he is forced into this. That excuse does not fly with Samuel. And more importantly, it doesn't fly with God. And in fact, this is one of the main instances where that I guess God will use to show Saul why he's not fit to be king. I'd like to look a bit further in his life now. The next story, Saul's again at war with the Philistines. But this time they don't have a giant army. Instead, well, they might have a giant army, but they have a giant too. And so they have Goliath. And we know this story very well, right? Goliath comes out twice a day, issues a challenge of one-on-one combat, winner takes all. And you would think, at least I would think, that if anybody ought to take up that challenge, it ought to be Saul. I mean, one of the things we mentioned, one of the first things the Bible mentions about Saul, he's tall, right? Taller than all the other Israelites. So it seems physically like he's capable of doing this. But he's also king. And like I said earlier, it was his mandate to drive out the Philistines. It's his job. So you think he seems the most capable. It's his job to do it. He should be the one doing it, right? But he doesn't. He doesn't. In fact, nobody takes this up until David shows up. And of course, we know how that goes. David is victorious against Goliath. And it seems like a really good time. Seems like a really, really good, victorious moment. And it is. Israel's happy. At first, Saul is happy. But then the people start to celebrate. So I'd like us to look over now at chapter 18. 1 Samuel chapter 18. Verse 7. So in 1 Samuel 18, verse 7, it says, "And the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day on." So it says he eyed David. So when he talks about eyeing David, I think here might mean a couple of things. And first of all, I might have the idea of he's watching him. He's suspicious of him. But I also wonder if it's not, he's eyeing David as one would eye a target. David is now his target. And we would say, why? Why would David be his target? Now, David's only ever done good for Saul. We know he's done what he's done here with defeating Goliath, saving Israel. And there have been times where he's, on a personal level, helped Saul as well with his distressing spirits. So why is he acting like this? Because David's a threat. What more can he have but the kingdom? That's what Saul is seeing here, as he's seeing the threat. And what we see here is that, in fact, he does not just eye David. He starts pursuing David. And at first, what that looks like is he sends David out to go fight the Philistines, and David's victorious, but that's not what Saul wanted, right? He wanted the Philistines to destroy David. And then when that didn't work, it was like, all right, well, maybe I can pin him to the wall. And then that didn't work. And then it was like, well, bring him up to me in his sick bed, and maybe I can kill him there. Well, that didn't work. David left. And then even that wasn't enough. He started pursuing David. And he spent a good chunk of the rest of his reign pursuing David. He has no reason to feel this way, but he does. But he does. He feels threatened, and he feels like he needs to save himself. Now, I think there's one factor in this that is different than the story we just looked at with the burnt offering. Because there were similarities with the burnt offering. But at least in that instance, we could say it does not seem like Saul wants to disobey the Lord. It doesn't seem like that's his desire here, that he's like purposely trying to do something contrary to the Lord. That cannot be said here. And the reason that can't be said is because there are two instances where when David is on the run, Saul is vulnerable. David has the opportunity to kill him and doesn't. And in both those instances, David addresses Saul afterwards. You know what Saul says both times? Both times he says something along the lines of, I know you will be the rightful king. I know the Lord is with you. The significance in that is that Saul knows now he's going against the Lord. You can't make the argument anymore. It's like, well, I don't think he wants to disobey the Lord. No, I think he does. I think he does. Because I think he knows the Lord's will is that he should not be king anymore and that David will be king. And I think he's doing everything he can to fight against that. That's a big difference. Saul's trying to save himself is causing him to do things that he knows directly contradict what the Lord's will is. Well, I'd like to look at one more story. Much later in his life, Saul is again fighting the Philistines. And this time, there's not going to be a way out. He sees the army. The situation is bleak. He doesn't know how it's going to go. And so he needs information. And he wants reassurance. And I want you to look how he handles the situation. So let's look at chapter 28. 1 Samuel chapter 28. There are some things in this that we might look at, and we'll point these out, but we might look at and say, well, that was good. But I want you to see what I think is at the root of this. So in 1 Samuel chapter 28, in verse 3, it said, and the first few verses here, I'd say, are adding context to what's going to happen later. And it says, now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and necromancers out of the land. Real quick, just want to point out, notice that. Saul had put the mediums and necromancers out of the land. I think that is adding context. And I'd like to try and make a point on that in a second. Verse 4, the Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. So we're going to pause here for a second. So what we see is, again, the situation does not look good. And surprisingly, what does Saul do? He tries to go to the Lord. It's like, wow, that's great. I'm sure God will appreciate that. But God doesn't answer. So first I'd like to think about, why would God not answer in this situation? Why wouldn't he come to Saul's aid? Well, I like to suggest it's probably because for most of Saul's life, this had not been his approach to seek the favor of the Lord. And I would say really here, he's not seeking the favor of the Lord. He's just seeking the assistance of the Lord. I don't think he still cares about pleasing God. I think he sees he's in a pickle and he wants to get out of it. So God doesn't answer him. Well, what's he going to do now? Right? That's an even worse situation to be in. I mean, it's bad enough to have Philistines in front of you with a great army, but now God's not going to answer you. So what are you going to do now? Well, let's see. Then Saul said to his servants, seek out for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a medium at Endor. And we'll pause there. So what Saul does is when he realizes the Lord isn't going to answer him, is he says, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And I'm going to go to a medium. Now, there may be several things we can say about this. One of the things we would say about it would be, would God approve of this? Well, no, God would not approve of this, right? One of the things that Israelites were not supposed to have anything to do with were mediums and necromancers. And yet we see Saul going to one of those. But at this point, that's not super surprising, is it? I mean, is it really that surprising to us at this point Saul is disregarding God's will? I wouldn't think so. But I do think there is maybe something we can get from this. I just mentioned that that Saul does not seem to care about God's will. But notice that back in verse 3, Saul had put the mediums and necromancers out of the land. That was something he decided was worth his time. Why? I mean, he had other things that God had directly told him to do, such as fighting the Philistines, and here he is doing that. But again, for 8 to 10 years now, he's not been doing that because he's been pursuing David instead. So why take the time to do this? I'm going to speculate just for a second. Stick with me. I wonder if it's because this happened to be one of the things that Saul agreed with. I wonder if this is one of God's commandments that Saul thought, you know what, I think God got it right there. So let's do that. And if that's the case, then I think that makes what Saul does here even more interesting. Because not only is Saul disregarding God's will, which he's shown he's been willing to do anyway, but he's disregarding his own personal moral code. I think what we're seeing here with Saul is we're seeing the degradation of a man. Is we're seeing a broken man. And he sees danger in front of him. He's trying to save himself, and he'll go at any lengths to do it. I think that's what we see. These three stories are the three stories. Because after this, there's nothing else. Not for Saul, at least. Because after this battle that's coming up is that bloody battlefield I mentioned earlier. So why did I bring these up? What do these three somewhat seemingly unrelated stories have to do with one another? Well, what do they have in common? Well, obviously they have some things in common, like Saul's in all of them, but that shouldn't be surprising. He's also fighting the Philistines, but that's not the thing I'm wanting to look at. He's also disobedient. But I was trying to emphasize in all of those is that in all three situations, Saul feels the pressure to save himself or something he cares about. He feels the pressure. So in the first story, he sees the people leaving him. He sees the Philistines coming in. I better do something. And then with David, the people really favor David. They might make him king. I better do something. And then here at the end, that is a great army in front of me, and I don't think we can beat him. I better do something. He feels the pressure. He feels the pressure to survive, of self-preservation. He's afraid of losing his kingdom, his family, his legacy, and his life. Now, I'd like to say this. This feeling that Saul has, in and of itself, is not wrong. It's not wrong to want to survive, and in fact, we all have a built-in desire to survive. So that's not the problem. The problem is with how he reacted. Because what does Saul do in every single circumstance? He trusts himself. Every single time he reacts by trusting himself rather than God. The people are leaving me. The Philistines are coming in. I know I was told to wait to offer the burnt offering, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because I need the Lord on my side. David is victorious for me. The people seem to celebrate him. I'm worried he might take the kingdom. Well, instead of living the way I ought to live after the Lord has rebuked me and reigning the way I ought to reign, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get rid of the problem. I'm going to try to get rid of David. I'm going to take matters in my own hands. And then at the end, what we just talked about with the great army. Well, I'll try to seek the Lord at first, but if he doesn't answer, then I'm going to do my own thing. What he does every single time is he trusts himself. He does not obey the Lord. He does not trust his will or trust that the Lord's ways are always best, especially when the Lord's ways oppose what Saul wants to do. In fact, every single time he knowingly acts against the Lord's will. Now, here's the thing. We're bringing all this up with Saul, but this is all true with us as well. In our lives, we are also tempted to act against the Lord's will to preserve ourselves. My guess is that if you're understanding what I'm saying right now, then you have felt that before. You could be feeling it now, but you probably will feel it again. We all feel the need to save ourselves in some way, and the only way we see to do that sometimes, the only way we see to save ourselves, is by doing something we know is not right. So let me bring up a couple of examples here. So let's say you have a job, and your job asks you to do something immoral. Maybe they ask you to steal something, they ask you to mistreat somebody, they ask you to do things you know you ought not to do. And if you don't do it, then you lose your job. You going to feel the pressure? Probably. Because I want to keep my job, right? I need a job to survive. My family needs my job to survive. Maybe I need to do it. Remember Saul. Or what about if your job asks you to regularly forsake the assembling of ourselves together? Well, I know what the Lord has said. He said not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. But I need a job. And doesn't God want me to have a job to provide for my family? Doesn't he want that? Doesn't he want me to take care of my family? Yes. We can try to make excuses for why things are okay. But I would say remember Saul. What about something like lying? You know, I feel like with lying, I was trying to think about earlier, what are the reasons that a person has to lie? There might be several, but I was thinking about 2 or 3 main reasons why people lie, at least. And I think one reason people lie is they lie to, kind of get ahead, to gain something from it. But I would say probably the first reason that we all learn to lie is to preserve ourselves. Why do children lie? They lie because they don't want the spanking. Why do teenagers lie? Teenagers lie, well, maybe for that same reason, they don't want a punishment. But a lot of times they lie too because they want to save face. Because they don't want to lose their reputation. They don't want to seem incapable. And so they lie. And by the way, adults lie for those same reasons, don't they? Now, we know God said we ought not to lie. But there are times where we know we're going to lose something, or something bad is going to happen to us if we don't lie. So what do? You're feeling the pressure. What do? Remember Saul. We might also feel it whenever someone attacks us. And I don't mean necessarily physically. I just mean when someone is attacking us in our lives and things are not going the way we want, what we want is we want to retaliate. We want revenge. Because that's how we think we survive sometimes. We get back at them. And we know we ought not to do that. We ought not to get revenge. But we feel the pressure to do it. Remember Saul. There are probably many other things, many other ways we could apply this. We think that we're surviving because we're forced to. But what we're doing is we're trusting in ourselves and our ways. And it's important to understand that because when you look at what happens to Saul, we need to understand that does not work. Saul's lack of trust in God and his reliance on himself to get out of bad situations is what led him and his family and his nation to that bloody battlefield. That's what led them there. Trying to save himself is what destroyed him. And what made him lose everything. And I think what we need to understand is the same thing will be true of us. If we try to do things our way, if we try to save ourselves, or we try to save something close to us, whether it's family or reputation or whatever it is, if we do things our way, it will lead to destruction. And I think through Saul, we need to see this. And again, I want to reiterate this point too. This was true with Saul, but it's true with us as well. To feel this sense of self-preservation, to feel the need to survive, to feel the pressure, that is not wrong in and of itself. And that is not why Saul failed. And for that matter, let me say this too. This is kind of a side point, but Saul also didn't fail because he was just a bad king, like bad at being a king, right? He didn't fail because of bad military strategy, bad alliances, bad economic choices, bad civic policies. He didn't fail because of all that. He failed because he didn't trust the Lord. He failed because he didn't put the Lord's ways first and trust they were always best. That's the reason he failed. And if we don't trust the Lord and trust his ways are always best, then what we'll do is we'll do the same kinds of things that Saul did. We'll do the same kinds of things. Now, they might not look exactly the same way, right? It might not look like making a burnt offering. It might not look like trying to kill someone and going through a wilderness to track them down. It might not look like that. But we'll do the same kind of things. And there will probably be times where we say it's excusable. We might say, well, it's okay. It's not like I really want to disobey the Lord. And in fact, maybe in some ways this is actually working toward something good, like protecting my family. But there will be other times where this is the approach we take to life. I guarantee you, it will not be excusable, and you will know it's not excusable, and you'll choose it anyway because you believe your ways are best. And when we do that, we will fall just as Saul fell, and we'll lose everything. One last passage I'd like us to look at. Turn to Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9. This will be the last passage we look at. Jesus warns us of this very thing. In Luke 9, verse 24, Jesus says, "For whoever would save his life will lose it." That's his warning. For whoever would save his life. You're trusting yourself, you're trying to get yourself out of the situation, you will lose it. It's guaranteed. You will be destroyed. And you will be destroyed because you chose it. But notice, not only does he offer a warning, he offers a solution. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. What does that mean? What does it mean to lose your life for his sake? I think it could mean literally losing your life, your physical life. I think it could mean that. But I don't think that's necessarily all it has to mean. I think the idea of losing your life for his sake is doing the exact opposite of what Saul did. I think it is trusting that the Lord's ways are always best and not trusting in yourself. Trusting that the Lord will save you. And again, not necessarily save you here on earth, but that he will ultimately save you and that he has given you the path to accomplish that. Saul couldn't see that. Or maybe more correctly, Saul would not see that. He refused to see that. The question is, will you? Will you see that in your life? And will you see that even in the face of danger? Whatever that might be. Will you still keep the perspective that God's ways are always best? Again, if you trust in yourself over God and take life in your own hands, you'll walk the path of destruction and you'll lose everything. What I'd like to encourage you in this morning is to lose your life to Christ and then save it in the end. Amen. Make your life about service and not survival. It will be difficult. There'll be times where you're fighting against yourself to do it, but it'll be worth it, and it's the only thing that works. So the question this morning is, can we help you with that? If we can, we would love to. We all want to make it to heaven, and we all want to help each other in that. So if you need that help this morning, please come as we stand and sing together.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact